Welcome to the Cryptocurrencies Show. I haven't had a proper cryptocurrency update in a while. And so who better than Jeffrey Tucker of AIER.org to be with us. Check him out on Twitter. Phenomenal guy and very wild insights about what's happening right now and in-depth insights of what's happening right now in cryptocurrencies. Jeffrey, thank you for being here.
Oh, sure. It's my pleasure. It's nice to see you.
You know, I would love to start with Bitcoin because
Okay.
here you told me Bitcoin is 97% of the action. Tell me a little bit more about this. Why so dominant? Because if you go to, for example, if you go to coinmarketcap.com, and I'm looking at it right now, market cap of Bitcoin or Bitcoin Core, 172 billion. You got Ethereum at 27 billion. But going down the list, there's 18 cryptocurrencies that are worth over $1 billion, right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about these are obviously not, small companies anymore, small tokens or small crypto, whatever they are. Why 97% of the action, especially if you go to the amount, there's 5,760 cryptocurrencies here on 23,000 markets, which means So
I love all this action. I love all the competition. I'm not one of these people that thinks there should just be one crypto. There are people like that, and I don't really agree with them. I think the more cryptos, the better. I actually don't care. It's not inflationary. It's just part of the action. When I say that it's 97% of the market, what I mean is the useful consumer market, like being bought, being sold, being transmitted, being in demand as a consumer product. It's 97% Bitcoin. The rest, people are buying and holding, putting in their portfolios. They like, people subscribe to these little services out there that allow you to trade this for that, trade this for that. So there's a lot of speculation going on. And every currency has its own brand and that sort of thing. But in terms of the overall market, really, it is basically a Bitcoin market, and that's it. So a typical way. So the question is like, okay, what are you using Bitcoin for? And this is where it gets interesting because, keep in mind that I've been involved in this market since really for 7 years now, 8 years really, and so when I first came into Bitcoin, it was $14, and we at the time had believed that. First of all, I was impressed to find out that it works. That's amazing by itself, right? But we believed that it could potentially be a competitor to the world's big currencies like the dollar, the yen, and so on, the euro, and we thought that could happen. And we also thought it was potentially worth $1 million. Okay, so everybody in the crypto space, once we passed $100, $1,000, we thought, oh, it's going to be worth $1 million. So that was always kind of the assumption within the crypto sphere. But what happened, I think, was two very important things. One is that Bitcoin couldn't scale to become a legitimate, useful currency because it became actually much less useful and much more expensive than throwing down a credit card or even ACH. And sometimes ACH even beats Bitcoin in terms of its clearing. I mean, Bitcoin's slow and expensive, and that I have my own arguments with the way this developed. I'm not happy at all about what Bitcoin became, and I think it could have been preventable, but hey, it could have been prevented, but it happened. And so then there was this great fork in opposition to kind of the throttling of Bitcoin called Bitcoin Cash. And then Ethereum is a kind of also, you could say, a form of fork from Bitcoin too, because the original protocol of Bitcoin included a layer for smart contracting, which the developers refused to admit. So that's why Ethereum came about. And then, then we had Litecoin and then, and so on and so on. All these composite currencies you see out there today with various brands and specializations. But in the end, what's fascinating to me is that you think what's going to make a cryptocurrency popular, right? Cheap, fast, secure. You think you know that, but actually, and it's true that Bitcoin is secure, but it's not cheap or fast. And so if I were in the business of predicting the markets, I would have thought that the cheap, fast, secure currencies would have by now beat Bitcoin. What I think has happened is that Bitcoin has so much trust behind it and so much brand loyalty, and people when they buy crypto with their national currencies, they want the thing that they know for sure is going to work every time. And so that turns out to be Bitcoin. So I can just tell you, that 97% figure, it comes really from the industry itself. And by the industry, I mostly mean the sales at Bitcoin ATMs around the world. And there you have millions of dollars being put in and then transferred out through remittance work and that sort of thing. And only 3% of that is anything other than Bitcoin.
So, Jeffrey, in 2017, early 20s, I actually found out about Bitcoin in January of 2013. The price was like $7 a coin. And, and actually, the following month, it was like 119. It had like a phenomenal January 2013 when I first heard about it. And then on wealthresearchgroup.com, on our free newsletter, I covered it for the first time early 2017. It was, I think, 350 or 370 a coin. And it rallied all the way up. The first time I started to caution people was at 10,000 before it even rallied another 100% to 20. And then March 2017, I covered Ethereum, and it was $12. In 6 months, it was 1,000. And then Monero was, nothing. We interviewed the Dash at 30, went to 4. Anyways, great profits, amazing. This is 2017. All I heard in 2017 is this is going to be everywhere soon. Like everyone's going to use it. It's every person that represented Dash, whatever, Litecoin, they said there's going to be on all the stores, etc. More and more adoption. Mass adoption was the buzzword. If I go right now and I want to spend a Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency, how is that what this is used for? Because what you're saying is fast, cheap, and reliable, which means that there are plenty of other ones that are cheap, fast, and reliable, should be the ones used. Are people using them?
No. And part of this all traces to the so-called HODL movement that began in, I think, about 2015, 2016, where a lot of the initial sort of old gangsters in the Bitcoin space had come to the conclusion that it should not be a consumer product and we should not promote adoption, that what we should do is think of it as a layer. It should be like the gold, crypto gold. So people don't spend gold. What they do, at least even under the gold standard, is you have gold as a foundation, but then you have other layers on top of that for processing payments and that sort of thing. So within the Bitcoin developer community, there was a complete rethinking of what Bitcoin should be, and which was not a currency really so much as a foundational layer upon which to build a currency system. So that's when so many of the efforts went into additional layers, none of which have really caught on or panned out, like the Lightning Network and that sort of thing. And that's really the only prominent one. But there are many other attempts to create new layers on top of Bitcoin. The problem is, again, I don't want to second guess what's happened, because there's really no sense in me outguessing the Bitcoin developer community. They have their own views, but I think there's a certain level of naivety out there that they thought that they had already created gold, like they had achieved the great miracle of alchemy. So they didn't have any more work to do. They were just going to rally and sit on their gold and watch the second and third layer payment systems be built on top of it, which hasn't really happened. Meanwhile, Bitcoin itself as a hand-to-hand currency, a day-to-day currency, never really panned out. And a lot of people saw this was happening. That's why there's Monero and Dash and so on and so on. They're all wonderful currencies, Bitcoin Cash, and so they're all fantastic, but none of them have the developer support behind them, the network, and I think most importantly, the popular brand. That's, I think, where Bitcoin itself has got overwhelming market dominance. You ask anybody in the world, these days, what do you think of Bitcoin? People are like, yeah, it's pretty cool. So if they're going to go to an ATM and throw down $1,000 into one, which one's going to be? Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, Dash? No. Monero? No. It's going to be Bitcoin. And that's where all the action is. And so why do people do this anyway? So what's the purpose of going into a convenience store and throwing down $1,000 to buy a cryptocurrency? Part of it is just curiosity. Yeah, they want to be cool. Yeah, that's still true. Another is remittances. It's the easiest, fastest way actually to get money across a border, especially these days. Jesus. And the third one is in hopes of profits later. So which may or may not pan out. So I think that's what's driving the market. Overwhelmingly, it's remittances, but it's also just curiosity, and people want to have a diverse portfolio. So that's why you're seeing millions and millions of dollars of Bitcoin sold every day on the markets. Now, why isn't that affecting the price? That's a really interesting question. I think what a lot of the people, I don't want to say me, because I was always skeptical of the idea that it's going to go to $1 million and then $10 million and so on. I never really believed that. We've had years and years and years of trying to discover what the proper, what is the stable, ongoing, expected price of Bitcoin. So after about the 10th year, I guess you would say, of Bitcoin, does that work out right? Yeah, that works out more or less correct. Or actually maybe the 8th or 9th year, there was a kind of perception that this thing is worth $10,000. That's it. And really, three years have gone by, during which time people have thought, okay, now it's going to be the breakout. Oh, now it's going to be the thing. Well, it hasn't happened yet, and I actually think it could be many years before it does. I think the fact that it's settled at $10,000, plus or minus $1,000, is an impressive achievement, and that it's holding that. I think it's good enough for now. So I don't think, people don't buy gold to make a lot of money. They buy gold for security. And I think it's the same situation right now with Bitcoin. People don't buy Bitcoin expecting to get rich. They want Bitcoin for security. And during all the lockdowns in the whole world, whether it's Israel or the United States or anywhere, China, Bitcoin never locked down. So that tells you something. This is worth something. Something you can't shut down in the age of lockdown is very valuable.
That's a great observation, by the way. And the age of lockdown, and you couldn't lock it down. That's interesting, because obviously everything else had supply chain issues. Even gold and silver had supply chain issues, which bumped the price up to crazy premiums. So okay, all understood. Now I want to talk to you about what can be the game changer. What could be the catalyst that makes this industry and especially Bitcoin more useful, more utility, worth more, and everything else? Or is this plateauing, dying out, whatever you want to call it, getting into this sort of a cycle where it's either favored because of government issues and people run to it, or if nothing else happens, then it sort of stays there, and because there are some big whales that are just not selling, then there's no disruptions in the price. What is the catalyst? Where is the next move coming from, if it's coming?
Yeah. Well, I think I know. I think I know exactly what you're referring to. So we have to back up slightly, understand something about national currencies. After 2008, which is the time period in which Bitcoin was basically deployed, the white paper, and then January 2009 was the Genesis block. There was a time of mass financial crisis. So there was a real fear that if you went to your ATM, you couldn't get money out. People were really genuinely worried about the quality of money. It seemed like every fiat currency was on the verge of failing. which is, I think, the driving force behind the invention of Bitcoin, in addition to sort of technological curiosity. The Federal Reserve, and actually central banks all over the world, pumped massive amounts of money into the economy to overcome that financial crisis, during which time there's a great expectation that there would be a tremendous inflation to follow. People do not understand how banks work. They don't understand banking theory. They don't understand the equation of exchange, which has a lot of variables in it, including velocity of money, productivity, and money on the street, and so on. So it's a little bit complicated, but a lot of people expected inflation to come. It never came. And that was partially because the central banks around the world started paying interest on reserves, meaning that they recapitalized the banks with all the fake new money, but never let the banks do anything. Well, they discouraged the banks from doing anything with the money. So it never actually entered into onto the streets and became hot,
Sure.
which is to say that inflation never materialized. Now, in the 10 years since, there's a growing psychology in financial markets all over the world that inflation is essentially impossible.
Yeah, I saw that headline from Time. Like, is inflation dead?
Yeah, people believe this. They think that central bankers are really smart. That we've somehow reached a magic moment in history where central banks can print $100 trillion and has no effect whatsoever. People actually believe this, and we've at least in most of the developed world, it's really been 40 years since we've seen anything like serious inflation. So people don't think it's possible. But the change of that psychology will be dramatic and instant. Once we start to see inflation ticking up and get into especially on the price level, as soon as you see many different products from many different industries all going up in tandem, whether it's apps on the app economy or carrots at the store or houseboats or clothing, everything begins to rise in tandem.
Broad-based inflation.
Yeah, then you'll start to see a real alarm that things have turned around. And if that happens, you look out. I mean, Bitcoin is going to go wild when people discover that Bitcoin is too slow and too expensive to use. They will shift over to Bitcoin Cash, and you've got instantaneous liquidity between the two there, so it's no big deal. We're going to see a lot of different cryptos being used, depending on the country and depending on network effects and so on. So that will turn everything around. I don't see that happening though anytime soon, even though central banks have been wild with the inflation and so on, bailing out outrageous amounts of government debt and even entry in stock markets and creating money for God knows what. It's just been crazy. But at the same time, we've seen a dramatic, unprecedented deliberate suppression of productivity. So in the US, there's some estimates that suspect that the next GDP figure is going to show a 50% decline. Okay, so that's productivity. Productivity is part of the equation of change. So if you cut economic activity down by half, you've seriously put a upward limit on inflationary pressure, and in fact, it's going to tip into deflationary pressure. No matter how many trillions of dollars you create, if you have productivity crushed by half, and you have velocity also falling by a quarter to a third, which I think is very likely to have happened, you're really discouraging the appearance of dramatic price inflation. So I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon. However, let's pretend as if society goes back to normal sometime in the next 3 years or 5 years. God knows, right? We've learned that humanity is insane, everywhere on the planet Earth, apparently. But let's say we get back to normal. We're not afraid to get on an elevator with more than one person, and we go back to flying around, and I can come see you in Tel Aviv and come see me, and so on. And the world goes back to normal, and all the damage of the lockdowns is repaired, and there's going to be a lot of impatience. Velocity of money is going to go through the roof. We're going to see productivity explode. Then you've got a serious problem, because central banks are going to face the problem of sopping up all this excess liquidity that they've created over the last 6 months and doing something with it. They're going to really have to be mopping the floors really fast. And I don't think central bankers have ever faced anything that challenging. And we'll see if they're up to the task. We'll see. If they don't achieve it, we could see global hyperinflation.
Okay, well, let me ask you something. On that regard, and this will be the closing question, does it matter who wins the coming elections in terms of monetary policy? In other words, if Biden wins, does Powell feel, oh my God, I can act in some way? Or if Trump wins, does he feel I need to act in another way? In other words, in 4 months, will we have a dramatic event that will shape not the fiscal policy, which we know this will shape because we know what Biden wants to do compared to what Trump wants to do, but will it affect how the Federal Reserve behaves with the government?
I've never been asked this question before, so I'm thinking through my answer right now. And I think it might be counterintuitive. If Trump wins, I think we could see Powell seriously under pressure to inflate and put more money, hot money on the street. And that could be actually very dangerous. And because Trump has been a wild inflationist since he wants negative interest rates all the time, for example. If Biden wins, he's going to bring in a lot of these so-called modern monetary theorist economists. I can tell you this much. The corporate class, the banking class, the central bankers, and the economists at the Fed despise these people. They think they're insane and crazy and cranky. So my guess is that if Biden wins, we will start to see a much more responsible monetary policy, only because I think the Fed knows that if modern monetary theory prevails, we're going to be living through Weimar within 2-3 years. So I would expect a tighter monetary policy under Biden.
Jeffrey, let me make sure that I got this from you. The modern monetary theory is not popular with the Federal Reserve?
No, they despise all that stuff. No, they're all crazy. These people are insane. I mean, they all are. They're all just like, these are people who think you just print unlimited money and pay for, you just buy prosperity with paper.
Sure.
And so no, the Fed hates these people. They're all, there's not a single modern monetary theorist who has any credibility with central banking community, much less the corporate class. These people are,
that's a huge relief.
They're the communists of the monetary world. I mean, you know, we may not like central bankers, but they're not communists, all right?
Very interesting, Jeffrey. Hey, I want to ask you in closing, is there anything that you're watching right now that is something that you're very intrigued by just, you know, fascinated, surprised by, in terms of either the markets, commodities, or elsewhere in the economy, that you're saying, man, I want to be following this every day because this is very interesting how this develops. What was very interesting to you?
Well, there's two things that I'm really fascinated by. One is the financial market recovery, which I think is based on absolutely nothing whatsoever, and that may be okay. But there's still optimism out there in the markets. I think the markets are still under the belief that we're going to come to our senses and open up the economy, and that the Great Suppression is going to end. We're going to experience a huge explosion of prosperity. I think this is widely expected and widely believed. If that psychology changes, I think we'd see the markets go in the other direction. I don't think it's because government's creating all this paper and Congress is spending money. It's optimism that it's not going to get any worse. Okay, that's one thing.
Gotcha.
The second thing that I love to follow, that I'm absolutely fascinated by, has to do with finance, but it has to do with the beautiful curves we're seeing created all over the world in terms of the COVID-19 and how it's whether you're open or closed or locked down or whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. And in every country, it's exactly the same curve.
Sure.
You know, it sweeps through, wipes out people in closed quarters or above 80 with low life expectancy.
Gotcha.
And does terrible things for them, and then begins to spread to the rest of them. Then about 20% infection rates. Then the infection rates begin to fall and death rates fall to zero. And we've seen this in every country. Israel, Sweden, United States, doesn't matter. And
yeah,
it's the same everywhere. And to me, well, I called it beautiful. It's actually terrifying. But What it shows is that governments have no power over this virus. None. I mean, it's hilarious. The virus comes in with this little sweeping operatic move until herd immunity is changed. And then the virus, if it has a sense of humor, is laughing while all the politicians of the world are saying, oh, you do this, don't get on the elevator. You need to, don't eat together in the restaurant. You have to use paper cups, don't use glass. You have to have a mask on. It's just a bunch of crazy people, right?
Yeah.
Saying things that don't have any effect on anything. So in a way, I think that's a beautiful message we can take from this horrible last 4 months, which is to say there's certain forces in operation in the world that the political class cannot control no matter what they do. And I think ultimately that's a very optimistic message.
Jeffrey, vaccines, anti-vaccines, or in the middle?
Look, there's never been a vaccine for a coronavirus. So I just, I wonder about this. I would be very suspicious. In the end, we learned to control AIDS, which is a wicked, wicked virus. We learned to control it through therapeutics, and we figured it out, and we managed that disease that way. And I think we're gonna manage COVID-19 the same thing through steroids and various normal ways that we deal with respiratory infections. And I'm very doubtful of any vaccine. At least I think. I wouldn't be first in line to take it. I can tell you that.
Exactly. Okay, Jeffrey, thank you very much. This was awesome. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.